believe it is 6 or 5 o'clock. So we'll start the meeting. Mark, do you have the roll?
I'll just quickly call it. Peter Connor, is he here?
Yes, I did.
Yes,
see
I'm here.
He's there. Nate Day,
Present.
Tad Dockery. I see Tad.
Here.
Ella Donner. I do not see Ella. Ken Markert.
Here.
Katie Nelson is here. Dane Ramsey's here. Dale Rhodes
Present.
is here. Carrie Schaffner is here. And Jim Schutz. I saw Jim.
Here.
So only Ella is missing. We have 9 present. And we also
Okay.
have are graced by Kirsten. I saw her here. Oh, there she is. Kirsten Kleckner is here and someone on a phone call.
All right, well, we'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for being able to attend tonight's meeting. Our first order of business are the minutes of September 8th. Could I have a motion for that?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
That was me, Dale Rhodes.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Our next item is use of leading pedestrian intervals at traffic signals.
So you'll recall in September that we had one of our committee members, Tad, I believe it was, requested some information about leading pedestrian intervals, or LPIs. And so that led to an exchange with the city engineer, which in turn led to this informal proposal from SRF Consulting, which is the firm that the city has on retainer, if you will, for traffic studies. And so I presume you reviewed the locations that were in the packet. These are the signals that we have today in the city that are city controlled. And then we have his proposal tasks that he envisioned for implementation. I do want to emphasize that we don't have any funds budgeted for this for next year. The city just approved the budget last night, which originally the timing, I was trying to get this to you last week, and then we had the glitch with the meeting. My apologies. But it's, the budget can be amended with a council vote if that at some point in time becomes feasible. It's, at least for now, discussion for you to see what you'd like to do with this information. So I'll turn it over to the committee.
So do we have any, has everybody had an opportunity to look at that? And does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts on this?
My thought remains, let's make it happen, but just want to stress that again.
All right. So Mark, this you talked to Sean about this. Is this something that he thought needed to go to Public Works too?
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's a modification of the traffic flow, traffic conditions, it should go to Public Works. I know Carrie can probably speak to that as well, but I think that would be certainly appropriate. I wanted you to know, I think the idea of the intent here is to make it easier and safer for pedestrians to get a head start with crossing a street before vehicles start moving. I mean, that's the simple goal here. The effect of it is that there's an additional delay for drivers at intersections, and that's okay. We are a complete street city, and I think, Tad, if I recall, you were specifically keyed in on the intersection of Century and Donna, where we
Yes.
recently added a left turn signal there. Recently, meaning probably in the last year or so. And so as a result, traffic that comes out of Middleton Hills and out of the Metro Market now will make a left turn, and the pedestrians don't get don't have a head start. And so, Tad, I think you pointed out that one, and then I wanted to see what other intersections that is the case at the city, and it seems like it's basically every intersection.
Yeah. So I'll just add to that really quick. At that particular intersection, even if I arrive first before there are any cars in the left turn lane and press the button, if a car arrives in the left turn lane within the next, say, 30 seconds, they get to go ahead of me. In summer, that's just kind of annoying. Now it's winter and it's pretty infuriating. That happens actually very close at the, not the intersection crossing Century at Branch. That's the one for the Conservancy, which is the only one I'm aware of that has LPI. The other intersection, the other crossing there across Branch, which I used just tonight, that is the same condition. If a pedestrian arrives there, and if you're coming from the east, if you're passing right in front of Quick Trip, you have to really lean. It's also just an inaccessible button. Like, I don't understand how people in wheelchairs can even reach it. But you press that button, you get there before any cars, and they still get to turn right in front of you. Yep. I could talk at length about this topic, and we do have a time limit, so.
Mark, did you talk to Sean at all about the possibility, because this light seems to be particularly egregious. Did you talk to Sean at all about the possibility of working with the timing on this light while we do a study on the
Well,
rest of our
this one I think has the leading pedestrian interval, in this direction, right, for the Conservancy crossing, right, Ted? But this one
Correct.
not.
But that doesn't.
Right. So this is probably the only example of the light in the city where when people have pressed the walk button on either side, they get to walk first before motorists coming out of Branch Street get to turn. Let me back up a little bit here. So what happens, pardon all the spinning. So what happens is when the lights turn red on Century, this walk, if somebody has activated it with the push button, they'll get the LPI first. And if 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, whatever it is,
It's
they
3.
get a head start. But if nobody has activated it, then the green just happens. And I think that's fine. But Tad, you're saying that east-west, that does not happen. So what happens with east-west is somebody on Century, as soon as the light on Branch turns red and they get the green arrow, you always get the green arrow. If a car is here, the green arrow happens, and they get to go before there's no delay whatsoever. They get to go, and that's what you're saying is a frustration.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess my question would be why, if we want to be a complete streets city and we've already got one installed here, what do we need to study for?
Why not just do it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, why not just do it? I mean, if the study comes back and says, well, this would be appropriate at 5 or 6 of these intersections, and the other half it really isn't needed. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. That this should be a policy that the city follows.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jim. I was also going to add on to that, and that maybe some of these intersections that Ted, you identified and we're looking at. I mean, is there a way we can do this without the beg button too? I mean, can you just set the LPI so you don't even have to press the button, especially if there's pedestrians there all the time?
Sorry, this is Carrie. I was having trouble with audio. So just wanted to let you guys know that, but I'm back now. I kind of agree with the last comment. I don't know. It just seems like this makes a lot of sense. And why do we need a study? I agree with you, Jim.
I think the answer that Sean would say is that several of the signals in the city are coordinated with each other. And so what would be the impact of adding that delay? I'm not saying that we should do the study. I'm just saying that would probably be his response. I have no problem with, I think we should just implement these as well. I don't think adding 3 seconds of a delay is a hardship, but that's my guess would be his response. You know, what are are there any unintended consequences is what he'd want to know.
Well, at that point, if this goes to Public Works, then the Bike and Pedestrian Committee can make a referral to Public Works with their recommendation that it gets implemented without the study, if that's the desire of the committee. If the Public Works Committee then decides, well, no, we need a study, then council splits the tie. So that would be one way of going about it.
Yeah, see, so it talks about review coordinated timings and how it affects each movement. Yeah, I mean, I think we know what the effects are without doing a study. So I think that's a valid question. What do we get?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Carrie, I'm happy to wait for you. You were in on this first.
Oh, sure. I was just gonna say, I think maybe rather than saying a study, maybe it's more of like a how does this thing get how does this get implemented, and maybe it's answering those types of questions. But yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Katie.
I was wondering how the timing for the whole city's worth of lights gets programmed. Is it something like if we tilt the timing of this one light, do they have to go to every single, is it like this manual process, or is it a computer program where you can say like every light's gonna be delayed by a certain number of seconds and it can be done in one move so that all of our intersections could be helped? Or is it this like, oh God, then it's like this domino thing?
I think what they do, you asked a couple questions. I think they have to manually, in Middleton's case, most traffic signals, if not all, you have to manually modify at the signal. There is technology. I think Madison's starting to shift toward that, where you can adapt signals to have a centralized traffic flow. I don't think Middleton's have been implemented that way yet. So that's the first question, how it's modified. But secondly is, yes, that you want to, for example, if Branch Street and Donna Drive and Park Street, High Road are all coordinated, there's some thinking about, and I don't know if that's the case or not, but let's use campus as an example. We've all driven through campus over the years, and we used to see for many years when you traveled east, or when you traveled west, you could just go at, frankly, too fast a speed, 30, 35 miles an hour to make all the lights. Now I've noticed, and I think Madison has done this intentionally to try and slow down the traffic, which is very effective to have them not all be in one big queue. So that's what we're talking about in Middleton on a different scale, obviously.
Got it. Although I'm sorry to keep going here. If you're turning left off of Century onto Branch and you have to wait for that light, or if you would have to wait for a pedestrian, you have to stop at a stop sign at Maywood.
Yeah, but those lights, there's not coordination on Branch Street between Century and University. The coordination is along the arterial streets like University and Century.
I see.
If that's, and I'm presuming, I know there's some coordination. I just don't know which signals are synced with each other. I just don't know that, but I know that that's the sort of thing that Sean is pointing out that would change. And, I think the committee's position, from what I'm hearing from the discussion, is, so what? Let's prioritize pedestrians. And that's great. I mean, that's the impetus of the complete streets and trying to reclaim the streets for pedestrians. So I think in the interest of time, if that's the consensus, and several of you said it, that you'd like to recommend that this be a action item, the recommendation would be to the Public Works Committee to just go ahead and do this work without the study. I mean, that could be a motion that you make, if that's what you want to do.
I would like to make that motion that the city install LPIs at all the intersections, and in a manner which Public Works feels would be the most effective way, or something to that, like that.
All right, thanks, Jim. Is there a second for Jim's motion?
I'll second.
Tad seconds. Are there any other questions or comments?
So the motions that the city, to recommend to Public Works that the city install LPIs at all intersections in a manner that Public Works feels would be the most effective way.
Is that what you intended, Jim?
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We're on to our next item, which is the Acre Farm General Implementation Plan.
So this is a new proposed development on the north side of the city. Let me find a map here. Between High Road and Pheasant Branch Road. There we go. It is currently 5 acres of, or 5 parcels of land, all owned by the Acre family. And it's being proposed for 800, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but you probably have all seen the proposal. Let me make this a little smaller. There is going to be a meeting between the developer and representatives of the Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy, or Watershed Committee, I should say, tomorrow, to discuss their interest in the project and their ideas and issues and concerns. And then this is going to the Plan Commission next Tuesday for a public hearing on the rezoning request to zone it for a Planned Development District General Implementation Plan. And so you've seen this before in concept several months ago, and the opportunity before you tonight is to provide any feedback on the more detailed submittal that was in your packet. That's my background.
Okay, Mark, can you show us specifically where, because they did have the bike path going through there and connecting. Can you show us where the?
Let me just see here. Did I have a? Read this 8 and okay. 20. Oh, I'm sorry. See in particular pages 8. That's not right. Why did I say page 8? That doesn't even make sense. So just a second. I must have been looking at a different PDF when I wrote my staff comments. Sorry about that. All right, so the bike facilities. There we go. Pedestrian circulation. Okay. So that's one of them, Dan, right?
Yep, it shows the multi-use paths. Can everybody see that it's got the arrow on? So kind of how that works through the development.
So recall that to the west, Bellefontaine Boulevard was originally intended to be ultimately a 4-lane street, but the city council has now had directed that it no longer be built as a 4-lane road in the future. And so we're going to have a shared use path on the south side of Bellefontaine, starting at Parmenter Street, where it will connect with the Highway 12 path, go through the Bell Farm development, which is on the cusp of being approved. Then through Misty Valley here, and then that's what this heavy pink line is coming out, going through the south side of Bellefontaine, connecting with a future path. Also, it looks like along this cross street here.
Mark, does that, where you just said it crosses, then it just picks up with the regular, the trail that exists now?
To the west, well, the path will exist to the west eventually. There will be one continuous bike path along Bellefontaine Boulevard if this is approved as shown. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the way it's being planned now, instead of a 4-lane road. And then it shows here this connection to the east to Pheasant Branch Road, which does not have bike lanes. And I don't know exactly where that comes out at the Conservancy, but I could give you an idea of that here separately.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if it connects onto the current multi-use path on the Conservancy.
It probably doesn't line up exactly, and
Oh,
let me just get a sense. Oh, actually, you know what? It would be, no, the path is right here. It's, you see, if you can see my, I know it's
yeah,
very hard to
you
see.
can, yeah.
That's where it is. So, and there's some topography here, but it wouldn't take much to connect.
Mhm.
It wouldn't, there's a parking lot here that is managed by the county. It wouldn't take much effort to connect there.
Right. Cool.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
I actually
Mark-
have,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I actually have kind of a laundry list.
Okay,
And I
Fire away.
haven't been able to comment on the plan in any previous stages. I'm very glad to hear that Bellefontaine is being reduced down to 2 lanes throughout. That's great to hear. And I realize this isn't the developer. I still am kind of frustrated with the overall platting, that big remnant of a high-speed turn there. It's still looks like a car sewer to me. It's not going to be great for transit. As a result, the bus, any bus that is eventually there is going to kind of wander around the north side. It's going to be difficult to place bus stations. I do have specific comment that for bikeability, like the internal network's fine, but there's just not a lot of, and this is a problem kind of with previous decisions that we've made. The north-south connectivity is just not that great. I can't speak for every bike commuter, but having to commute through the Conservancy is not exactly ideal. When I go when I cycle to other sides of the town, the Conservancy through the middle of town is very pretty and very nice and very slow and goes nowhere. It's so that lack of just easy north-south connections on bikes is a problem. Walkability wise, just the west side of it is great. Everything's nice and dense, and there's destinations, places to go, places to walk. The left side is just more car sprawl, and it's kind of frustrating to see the west side, this nice nucleus, this actual progress, and the east side where we're still kind of using most of the land for the least amount of return. So that's my short version. But I do have to add, I really liked the street cross sections. I thought the street cross sections were very nice. The only thing I would do is take away the car parking and replace it with protected bike lanes. I, in general, would like protected bike lanes and multi-use paths throughout the city. When I'm a pedestrian, I don't want to be sharing space with cyclists. And when I'm a cyclist, I don't want to be sharing space with pedestrians. We're two different things. You know, pedestrians need space for their little kids to be distracted and little kids, and cyclists need space to go quickly. But otherwise, yeah, really loved the basis of the cross sections.
And Mark, what were the widths of the proposed roads? Is there an opportunity to have, bike lanes? Marked bike lanes?
Mark, you're muted.
Sorry, I was having a coughing fit earlier, so that's why I muted. I said we usually do bike lanes only on streets that are functionally classified as collectors or greater. And instead of local streets, which all the ones in orange would be, well, they're all in orange. So I would say Bellefontaine would be classified as a collector street, but the rest of these would be local streets. And so our policy would not be to have bike lanes marked on local streets. And we don't necessarily mark bike lanes on collector streets either. The issue with taming traffic for the benefit of pedestrians and bicyclists is how the cross section is designed. And there's a school of thought that says on-street parking helps slow traffic. And then there's, of course, some bicyclists who are concerned about car doors opening on the street, from on-street parking. As you noted, Tad, some pedestrians, bicyclists don't mix as well on the sidewalk. So, it's hard to find a design that fits everybody, that meets everybody's preferences or needs. But I guess that's my response.
Just to build on what I briefly mentioned, what I'm specifically suggesting, those cross sections are showing 8-foot wide parking lanes. Side parking, from my opinion, side parking just incentivizes car use. Quite apart from the potential of getting doored, it incentivizes people to drive because there will be a parking spot. We could instead use the space designated as parking for the bike lanes and just have no on-street parking. For the 70-foot cross section for Bellefontaine itself, that would be, instead of having that parking there, you'd have what I would like to see is a bike lane with a protected curb and preferably vertical separation as well. For those smaller cross sections, I have a preference that federal highways is being very persnickety about. So
this is it's a development, but I think you got to offer some parking somewhere for people visiting these other people on these homes that are building out there. There has to be some sort of on-street parking. I mean, I agree with all the comments that have been made about slowing down traffic and bicycle safety and everything, but there still has to be, and where they're going to park their cars if they get visitors. If we, take all the parking away.
in their driveways.
Yeah, well, that it's you could, I guess, but still it's I don't know what the city policy is on that, but
But there's no bike parking throughout the city. There's no facilities.
well, that's my comment I made.
I understand.
You can argue all day about that, but still it's people, if they have visitors, they have to have a place to park their car somewhere.
Speaking from someone who lives on Park Street, we have a bike lane. Mark's laughing. This is and Carrie used to live next door to me, so she knows too. It's really a tough balance to strike. As soon as we stopped parking on the street and gave the bike lanes, I think it did make the cars feel like they could go faster. And as a result, bikers, some of them are totally willing to use the lane. Some of them are still too afraid to be on that street. So there's a balance to be struck. And I don't know what the magic formula is. There's a balance to be struck with speed of cars and bike lanes. And Tad, I love the idea of the vertical separation for a bike lane, but the snow plows are gonna say no way. So I offer no solutions, just experience of frustrations on both sides. Sorry.
Mark, are these going to be, these for the most part are going to be neighborhood streets? I mean, the arterial, if you will be
Yes.
Bellefontaine, and otherwise we're looking at interior neighborhood streets. It doesn't
Yeah.
appear as, because one thing is when you have a kind of a self-contained neighborhood, and for the most part, with a few exceptions, this is a self-contained neighborhood. You're not going to get, I mean, there's no place for people to go, so that you're not going to get bicyclists commuting through there as a means to get from one place to the other on the interior neighborhood streets. You're going to have the people riding their bikes back and forth from wherever and kids, but you're not necessarily going to get the commuter traffic. So I think that having said that, I mean, I would have to, somewhat agree with Ken in that you can't take away all on-street parking.
By the time these people, everybody puts their houses in their driveways, there's not gonna be a lot of curb space anyhow. I don't think the slots look pretty close. On-street parking isn't gonna be that great anyhow, I don't believe.
If you've ever visited Rooster Run, it's a small neighborhood in Stonefield. They do not have on-street parking, but what they do have is multiple small parking spaces for visitors. They don't necessarily get a ton of visitors, but I do have friends there and I do go there. And so, yeah. Of course we can't actually see inside from Street View, but you can see right there, there's a little parking space. If you move in further towards the angles, you'll see you can actually see a car parked in a space up towards the top. So there are multiple small parking lots that are off street, not in anybody's lawns, but available for visitors to use. So that is a possible solution.
So Mark, what is it that you're looking for from us tonight? Do you want
Any
are you
feedback?
gathering ideas to feedback to take back to the developer? What are you, what specifically are you looking forward?
Right, input to provide to the plan commission for my staff report that I'm finalizing tomorrow. Another thought is you could comment on the cul-de-sacs, we try to avoid cul-de-sacs now, but we also have a public comment that we've received already from people who don't want to see connections with Pheasant Branch Road, or to minimize the connections with Pheasant Branch Road because of its rural character, which some have called a rustic road, which Sean Stowski has said is functionally classified as a collector street. So we've got, a street like Pheasant Branch that's maybe people view differently. They definitely view differently. So you may have comments on that.
I actually kind of don't care about cul-de-sacs as long as there are sidewalks or just paths connecting them for pedestrians and cyclists. They perform a traffic calming function, and I'm fine with that.
but they increase the burden on, these are short cul-de-sacs, so it's not as noticeable. But when you have longer-
That's true, but I'll kind of jump back and the more cynical aspect of this is still a car dependent neighborhood. Just overall, removing the cul-de-sacs isn't going to change that a whole lot. There aren't enough jobs in the commercial places. People are going to be commuting there's not enough stores in the commercial areas. People are going to be driving cars elsewhere in the area for most of their daily needs. So I kind of personally view the cul-de-sacs as almost moot at that point.
Anyone else have an opinion on that?
I have a question about it. Mark, why is the city not liking cul-de-sacs as much anymore?
Cul-de-sacs is a suburban development style, a pattern that shifts traffic to the streets that don't have cul-de-sacs. So, when you have, like, think of the Fox Ridge or Stonefield neighborhoods where there's longer cul-de-sacs, they then, everyone has to leave a cul-de-sac, go from one bulb and then, take a big circuitous route to get to the next one. You basically shift the burden to just a few streets as opposed to the people who live on cul-de-sacs who have the traffic calming.
Got it. Yeah, I see that.
That's the logic. That's the thinking behind it. I mean, the longer the cul-de-sac, the less desirable it is. But as a general rule of thumb, grid development without cul-de-sacs is the way to distribute traffic and to have narrow streets. We used to build streets that were 36 feet wide or more. And for example, Stonefield North Lake, I like to pick on a lot because those streets are built far too wide and they never are the capacity is never fully used. And it's a lot more for maintenance, pavement repair and snow removal, and it leads to speeding and less pedestrian safety. So that design from the 60s, 70s, 80s is out of favor, and we're trying to do the narrow Middleton Hills style streets. And frankly, downtown Middleton has, Hubbard's a narrower street, and trying to emphasize connectivity, but de-emphasize cul-de-sacs.
Okay, thanks. Dan,
Kirsten, normally we wouldn't take comment because you're not a member of the community, or the committee, excuse me. But if you have something real quick, I'll let you speak.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I didn't know if you were going to have a moment during the meeting for us to speak. Normally you start out with that, so
We
I
used
didn't
to,
know.
we don't anymore, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Regarding this is an awful lot like Orchid Heights, and as a cyclist and a pedestrian, having fewer flows onto a street like Pheasant Branch, which I bike regularly, can be slightly safer, just like Heron and Indigo are the two feeders onto Q. I know exactly where to watch for cars coming into Q if I'm biking on Q. If you do have every single intersection going out onto Pheasant Branch, it would be it's already a dangerous road for cyclists. You'd have a lot more incoming traffic onto that road where cyclists could get hit. And then just regarding Tad's thing on parking, I think a really good example would be Cedar Ridge Road, where you do not have any on-street parking whatsoever. And it's going through a community. You have the parking at the center. So I just wanted to comment on that. It would be that off-street parking exactly. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? All right, Mark, do you have what you need now?
I've got feedback. I don't know if I mean, that's fine. I think I'll lay out the pros and the cons, and that's feedback. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to make a motion. We wanted your feedback to see if there's anything else you saw as a missed opportunity or ways to improve the development site plan.
If if you have off-street parking, who's responsible for the maintenance of that?
If you have off-street parking, who's responsible for the maintenance? Well, Rooster Run is a private street. Cedar Ridge, actually Hans is on the call. Maybe he knows the answer to that. Hans lives up there. Hans Hilberg is with the Friends of Pheasant Ranch Conservancy. I don't know if the city plows those parking areas or not.
Yeah, Cedar Ridge was one of the first planned unit developments for the city of Middleton, and all of that parking is contained within city right of way, and it was dedicated to the public for that purpose. So it's maintained no different than any other median area that's in the right of way. Snow removal, mowing, everything like that is provided by the city.
Thanks, Hans.
Yep.
That's good to know. The only other example I can think of in the city where we have off-street parking like that is, I mean, when I won't say off-street, but you know, it's kind of like a parking lot, is Elmwood Avenue has angled parking, and then Middleton Hills, there's a couple of places too. And I don't know if the city, I have a feeling the city does not do the ones in Middleton Hills, but I could be wrong. But it's not common. So Hans, I appreciate that. I actually never knew that. So yeah, so pedestrian and bicycle circulation, I will say that from a transit standpoint, we hope to have bus service along Bellefontaine in the future. In the short term, certainly for the next several years, the closest bus service will be Century Avenue, which is quite far from here. It would be a mile walk, easily a mile walk. Pheasant Branch Road, of course, doesn't have sidewalks, so people would want to walk along High Road to get to a bus stop. So it's not going to be a transit-friendly community in the short term. But we are trying to make it pedestrian and bicycle friendly from the get-go so that it's easier to adapt transit and other forms of transportation.
Okay, very good. If there's no other questions or comments, then we'll move on to the last item.
Okay, and that was, I think, just an updates.
You were just going to give us a couple updates.
So we've had some, well, the budget, first of all, was adopted last night by the council. There is included in the budget, which the committee probably doesn't know, a couple pedestrian projects were added. One is a sidewalk, a path connection or sidewalk along Pheasant Branch Road, connecting Old Creek Road with, let me get the photo up again. This is something you've talked about before, but the council has added this now so this is Pheasant Branch Road at Old Creek. So an extension of the sidewalk here to the mid-block crossing, which is about here. I'm really happy to see that in the budget. And then the other project that was added was putting in an RFB at University and Mayflower, which is also really good. So that will be at one of the Mayflower intersections. I don't know which one yet, but if you can all imagine where that is, that's by Parkwood Plaza, not far from Willie Street, the bowling alley. So one of these, I'm guessing it'll probably be this intersection. It doesn't, you know, one of them will get an RFB to be determined. So those were two additions to the budget. Other than that, there's nothing really earth-shaking in the budget to report. There's no funding for trails for next year. Instead, what they're going to do for new trails or reconstruction of trails, instead the focus will be on developing a plan and assessing trail conditions. That's the focus. Trying to get my browser back so that you have the, let's see, where was it? Here we go. The second is the North Mendota Trail. Dan, you want to talk about this?
Bent? Is that,
yeah,
is that what we're saying?
I'll simply say that Dan and I are both extraordinarily disappointed and frustrated and, dare I say, angry that it looks like the section east of Q is not going to be paved this year because of the, because of foot dragging by the contractor, as far as I'm concerned. But now we've had snow set in that is not melting. And the weather forecast for the next couple of weeks is definitely not conducive for paving. It's basically the ground is freezing as we speak, and it's going to stay frozen. There's not an opening in sight. So a lot of winters, the first snowfall doesn't lead to everything shutting down, but it looks like that's where we're headed this year. And so I think they're still trying to see if it's going to be possible, but the asphalt plants are closing. So it's just not going to be, I mean, realistically, it's not going to get paved this year. So
Yeah, it's not going to get done this year.
yeah, I'm not even going to pretend that it is. I just don't, oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. North is up. So the section we're talking about is here from the Highway Q intersection east to Signature Drive. This sidewalk is completely ripped out right now, has been ripped out for far too long. And the contractor did not make the arrangements with the paving subcontractor in time. So we were put on the list for this past Monday, and then it got bumped to Tuesday, and Tuesday, of course, it snowed. So I'm sorry to say that we don't have a sidewalk replaced there. The only silver lining, I guess, for lack of a better word, is at least it's in an area where there's some internal pedestrian circulation in this development to get to the Quick Trip and the bus stop at South Ridge Way. It certainly isn't optimal, but at least there is a connection here. But again, we're not happy about it, and I'm sorry to accomplish that. I've also been working with trying to get an easement from property owners to the west here, west of Stagecoach. I've reached out to them to try and engage them in granting the city an easement, and those discussions continue. There's some reluctance on the part of both property owners to assist us with that, but we don't have a project there imminently. I was just trying to anticipate long-term that we, get the path extended from Branch Street up to Old Creek Road. The path behind Goodwill, from Goodwill to Branch Street, was supposed to be paved this fall as well, and that's going to be postponed to spring. Any questions on the North Mendota Trail? Last is I just was going to give you a quick update on the Parmenter Terrace intersection. I think what Public Works decided to do, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they decided to remove parking or have less parking on the north side of the road and put in a median at the crosswalk. And actually, Dan, you're on Public Works, I'm sorry. So that's just a follow-up to our previous discussion about it. That's the direction the city is going.
That is correct.
So there's no four-way stop in the offing. It's going to be putting in a median here with some parking restrictions.
Extending the no parking.
Right. I support this approach. I think it's a reasonable compromise. There were some issues and concerns the engineers had with putting four-way stop on Parmenter with the base of the hill. But that's the direction that the city is going at this point.
And if you've ever gone up that hill in the winter, you'll understand why. Okay, is that all, Mark?
I believe that's all I had on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you everyone for
A
coming to
quick
this
question
meeting.
in terms of future meeting. December holidays are coming up. December, our next regular meeting would normally be, I think we've moved to second Thursdays, right? Or was it second Wednesday? I forget now. What did we decide to do?
Second Thursdays.
Second Thursday. So that would be December 8th. It's in the holidays. We sometimes skip meetings in December. What's the preference of the committee? We can see if we have any referrals, any active items. What's your preference?
I will be out of town on that date.
Okay. So how about this? I'll work with Dan, and if necessary, Katie as vice chair, if there's any issues that come up. Otherwise, we are already 1 month or 1 week late this month, so it would only be a few weeks away. So let's tentatively plan to cancel the meeting, and if I will let you know, the week before, if for once and for all, if it's canceled. Let's just, well, how should we leave it? Should we leave it as tentative and then cancel it a week before? maybe we do it that way.
Leave it as tentative so people can have it on
Yep.
on their calendars.
Okay. All right, will do.
Okay, very good. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Got a motion second?
Second,
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you
Yep.
all.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.